Hello, and thank you for joining us for this 2009 MUTCD Compliance Dates and Definitions Standard Statements webinar. I'm Brad Sant, Vice President of Safety and Education for the American Road and Transportation Builders Association. Today we're pleased to have with us Hari Kala, the team leader for traffic control devices from Federal Highway's Office of Operations. He'll discuss the two proposed rules that are currently open for public comment. Among the topics to be discussed today will be the proposed rule on the definition of standard statements and the use of engineering judgment, and the proposed rule on MUTCD compliance dates. You may send your questions via the pods on your screen, and we'll hold those questions until after the presentation. Also, please note that we're offering professional development hours for this course, and for those of you who attend via the Transportation Development Foundation. To receive hours for attending this course, please follow the link provided on your screen during the webinar. The link will also be hosted on the WorkZone Clearinghouse at www.workzonesafety.org. And due to the high number we receive of PDF requests, we do charge to the Foundation a small amount of $10 for those PDHs. Thank you again for joining us on today's webinar, and it will be recorded for later viewing as well. So now we'd like to turn the time over to Hari Kala from Federal Highway's Office of Operations.
Thank you, Brad. Good afternoon from Washington, D.C. It's certainly my privilege to be here, and thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. As Brad told you, that I'll be talking about the two proposed rules related to the MUTCD. It seems like there's a lot of confusion out there about these rules, these proposed rules. So what I have is a very short presentation, and I want to leave more than enough time for Q&As later on. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box on your screen. So before I start, just want to point out that these are proposed rules. These are not final rules. These are proposed rules out for public comments. So what we are looking at right now is to get the feedback and input from you all. On the screen, the NPA stands for Notice of Proposed Amendment. It's basically a proposed rule. But again, I just want to let you know that these are out for public comments, and we're certainly looking for your input. Later on in my presentation, I'll give you the information how to provide the feedback. So first, I want to talk to you about the Federal Highway's proposed rule on the compliance date. The two rules I'm going to talk to you about, they have very narrow scope, very focused rule, and very limited in the scope. So first one, let's look at the rule on the compliance date. This proposed rule we published on the August 31st, 2011. There is a 60 days or 2 months comment period, which will end at the end of October. And again, as I said, that it's a very narrowly focused only on the compliance date. So we're talking about the compliance dates listed in the MUTCD in introduction, table I-2. And we have our proposal for the treatment of what we're going to do, what we're proposing to do with the different compliance dates. So what are the compliance dates? The very easy way to look at the compliance dates, they are deadlines to replace the existing traffic control devices out in the field. And all these compliance dates, they are listed in the MUTCD in the introduction, and they all established by the rulemaking. So whenever we update MUTCD, we introduce a new compliance date based on the new requirements or revised requirements. The current edition of the MUTCD, which is the 2009, there are 58 compliance dates, and these compliance dates are established over past 10 or 11 years, starting from the 2000 edition of the MUTCD, and then 2003 and subsequent edition had their own compliance date. The most recent edition of the MUTCD, 2009, in that we introduced 11 new compliance dates. But in total, the current MUTCD has 58 different compliance dates. I want to point out that these compliance dates, again, these deadlines, they only apply to existing devices. They don't apply to the new devices. So whenever an agency is installing a new device, they have to be MUTCD compliant. But the compliance date deals with the issue when you have the device out in the field, that what time frame do you have to bring them in compliance? So that's what the compliance dates are for. And usually when we establish these compliance dates, they are based on appropriate estimated service lives of those devices. Even if it's a ground-mounted signs or the traffic signals or pavement marking, we look at what are the estimated service life of those devices, and based on that, we establish these compliance dates. So what happens, as I mentioned, there are only 58 compliance dates, and there are hundreds of provisions in the METCD. So majority of the standards and guidances statements, they don't have a compliance date. So what happens if you don't have a compliance date for a device or a standard? Basically, if there is no compliance date, then our expectation is the agencies will replace them as a part of what we call the systematic upgrading program. It's based on the service life you establish, upgrading program, and you will replace those devices based on that. And when you develop your upgrading program, it can be based on, you can prioritize that program based on your safety needs and the resources available. In current times, the resources are very limited, so that's definitely a consideration when you establish your upgrading program for traffic control devices. And that applies to devices without the compliance date. Now, why did we decide to do this rule? It seems like there's a lot of confusion on a lot of provisions of the METCD specific to traffic signs. We saw a lot of news media reports on the street name signs, the letter height, mixed case lettering requirement, and definitely sign retroreflectivity requirement. There was this perception that the METCD standards require perfectly good signs to be replaced, which is obviously not true. And also, we understand and appreciate that there's a lot of agencies that are going through the tough economic conditions, and we definitely wanted to look at that as well. So just to give you a little brief history on this issue, that late last year, we issued what we call the request for comment, and that's exactly what the name suggests. They are requesting the comment from public. And we published that November 30th, 2010, basically trying to get input from the public and the agencies on the compliance dates. As a result, we got quite a very significant response. We got about 600 letters on the docket. And many agencies expressed their concerns about the compliance dates. And there are 3 or 4 specific things which I want to highlight. One is the agencies were very concerned about the minimum retroreflectivity standards for sign. There was also concern that the number of compliance dates there are too many compliance dates, and it's hard for agencies to keep track of them, and they have to spend resources to keep track and maintaining the list of those compliance dates. And there was a confusion on what's required and what's recommended. So again, seems like there was a big concern over that as well. And then finally, there was the agencies were concerned about this burden, economic burden, to comply with these established dates. Some of the compliance dates are coming in very near future, and there was concern that these compliance dates cause undue burden. So after we got all those comments from public, we set aside time to look at and analyze all those comments, and then we decided to proceed with the proposed rule. And that's where we are right now. So very broadly speaking, what we are proposing with this rule is that as I mentioned, there are 58 compliance dates. We are proposing to delete or eliminate the 46 compliance dates out of those 58. Out of that, 8 have already been expired, and 38 of them have the future compliance date, and which we are proposing to eliminate now. We are extending 4 compliance dates, and then we are proposing no changes to 8 what we consider safety critical compliance dates. And I'll spend some time to talk to you about those specific compliance dates. If you go to the METCD website, and I will give you a link later on, this is this is the information we have put in on our website, which has a track change spreadsheet, which shows what we are doing with compliance dates. But I'll give you the link later on in my presentation. And I think the biggest issue right now is the sign retroreflectively rule. So there are 3 specific compliance dates, and I just want to very briefly talk to you about those first. The first compliance date, which is due in very near future, is January 22nd, 2012, and that there is a requirement to establish or implement a method, assessment or management method for all signs. And the deadline is January 2012. By that date, agencies are supposed to or required to implement the method. What we are doing with that, or what we are proposing with that compliance date, is that we are proposing to extend it by 2 years, and that 2 years from the effective date of the new rule. So as you know, that we are going through the comment period. At the end of the comment period, we will issue the final rule. So the clock will start at that date when that final rule becomes effective. So it's 2 years from the effective date of the new final rule. And we don't have that date right now, but when we publish the final rule, we will put the date. So what does that mean? The one thing which I want to point out, which I should have on the previous slide, that this 2012 compliance date, not only we are extending it by 2 years, but we are limiting that date to only regulatory and warning signs. So it will apply, this compliance date will apply only to regulatory and warning signs, not to the guide signs and other signs, only to regulatory and warning signs. So what does that mean? First of all, we are not changing the requirement. The requirement is still going to be there. The requirement to have a method, assessment or management method for all signs, is still going to be there. But what it means that now you're going to have 2 or more, at least 2 years, to implement and start using the management method for regulatory and warning signs. We will not have, or we are proposing not to have, a specific date for guide and other signs. So the agencies will have that flexibility to, based on their priorities and their resources, to establish a method for those signs at their own pace. But again, we are not deleting the requirement. You still have to have method. It's just that we are extending the compliance date by 2 years for regulatory and warning signs, and we are not going to have any compliance date for method for guide signs and other signs. Also, there are 2 other compliance dates, one in 2015 and one in 2018. 2015 compliance date applies to replacing non-compliant regulatory and warning and other post-mounted sign, excluding the street name signs. And then there is a 2018 compliance date. That's for the street name signs and overhead guide signs. And those compliance date, by that date, you're required to replace all your non-compliant signs. And we are proposing to eliminate both of those dates. So if you look at the sign retro rule, there were 3 compliance dates. We are proposing to eliminate 2 compliance dates, 2015 and 2018. And we'll keep 1 date, but we are extending it by 2 years. And that's what, in a nutshell, is Federal Highway's proposal. So since now you don't have any compliance date for replacing those signs, 2015 and 2018, those compliance dates we are proposing to eliminate. Now the agencies have flexibility to determine that when they will schedule the replacement of those signs. But since you have that flexibility, then the agency would have this responsibility, or would need to be prepared to defend its replacement schedule if there is any liability issue. But now the whole purpose of this rule, or this proposed rule, is to give agencies more flexibility when they can replace their signs based on the funding they have. Now, that was very specific to the sign retro rule. Now, there are 8, as I mentioned before, that there are 8 compliance dates we are retaining, which these compliance dates we consider safety critical. Now, let me give you a little bit more detail on that. In Part 2, which relates to signs in the METCD, there's a requirement that all sign supports for the roads with the speed limit 50 miles per hour or over, the sign supports have to be crashworthy. And there is a compliance date which was established, I think it was in 2000, and the compliance date is January 17, 2013. Excuse me. we are proposing to retain that website, that compliance date. We are not changing that, so that compliance date will remain in place. So January 17, 2013 compliance date is not changing, which is for the crashworthiness of sign support. In section 2B40 of the METCD, there's a requirement for one-way signs on the non-signalized intersection with white median. There's a requirement on the placement of one-way signs. That compliance date is December 31st, 2019, and we are proposing to retain that compliance date. We are not deleting that compliance date. In Chapter 2C, there are requirements for horizontal curve warning sign based on the speed differential. There is a table in that Chapter 2C5 which gives you that what signs are required, what are recommended, and what signs are option at the horizontal curve. And there is a compliance date for those required signs, which is December 31st, 2019. That date was established as a part of 2009 METCD. Again, we are retaining that compliance date. We are not changing it. And we think all these three compliance dates, what I just mentioned, we consider them safety critical compliance dates. So therefore, we are proposing to retain them. The other compliance date, which we are proposing to keep unchanged or retain them, there is in Chapter 2E, there is a requirement for left exit plaques on the guide sign for all the left-hand exits. That was again established as a 2009 METCD. The compliance date is December 31st, 2014, and we are retaining that compliance date as well. At three different places in the METCD, in Part 6 and Part 7, there's a requirement for a high visibility garment for all workers, flaggers, and the school crossing guards. That compliance date was established in 2008, and again, we put that in the 2009 METCD. The compliance date is December 31st, 2011, and we are retaining that compliance date. We are not making any change to that as well. In Part 8, which deals with the railroad crossings, there is a compliance date to install yield or stop sign at all passive grade crossing. And again, that requirement has a compliance date of December 31st of 2019, and we are retaining it. So not only we are retaining all these compliance dates, the 8 compliance dates I mentioned, the underlying standards are also we are retaining. We are not making any changes to them as well. Now, as I mentioned before, that there are 4 compliance dates which we are extending, and I just want to quickly talk about those 4 specific compliance dates. There, in the Part 4, which deals with traffic signals, the Part 4 of the METCD, there is a requirement. There are 2 specific requirements. They have the compliance date. One is on that the duration of yellow change interval and red clearance intervals has to be based on engineering practice. And then there is also that the pedestrian signal have to have minimum 3-year buffer interval. Both of those requirements have the existing compliance date is December 31st, 2014, or whenever the signal timing adjustments are made. Now, we are proposing that date by 5 years. And that, again, the 5 years, the clock starts from the effective date of the final rule. So, again, that date will be pushed back by 5 years. In Part 8, which, again, deals with the railroad crossings, there's a requirement to install the retroreflective strip on the back of crossbuck signs and on the front and back of support of crossbuck signs at passive crossing. The existing compliance date we have is January 17th, 2011. We are changing that date to December 31st, 2019. The primary reason for changing this compliance date to be consistent with the other compliance date that I talked about on the installing the yield and stop sign at the passive crossings. We wanted to have the compliance date for both requirements same, so that the agencies have the flexibility to do all the work at their passive crossing in one shot and don't have to go twice. Now, very quickly, the compliance date which we are proposing to get rid of. I already talked about the retroreflectivity rule, but there are many more compliance dates which we are proposing for elimination. And let me very quickly talk about those. There there are 8 compliance dates which expired last year or the beginning of this year, and they were established as a part of 2000 and 2003 edition of the MUTCD. Those 8 expired compliance date, and I have listed the MUTCD provisions on the slide. And we are proposing to eliminate those 8 compliance dates. They're already expired, and our assumption is that most of the agencies have already upgraded their devices. If there are non-compliant devices for these requirements, the agencies can upgrade them as a part of their systematic upgrading program. So there are 8 compliance dates which are already expired. We are proposing to delete those. There are 33 other compliance dates which were established as a part of 2000 and 2003 edition of the MUTCD, which again we are proposing for elimination. There are a lot of these compliance dates, so it's hard to list them all. So at the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you our MUTCD website link. You can go there, and we have those tables which shows all the changes we are making. It's very easy to follow. So there are 33 compliance dates, again, we are proposing to eliminate. Many of these compliance dates are related to the new and revised sign design. For example, there is a recommendation for larger letter heights on street name signs. There is a compliance date for that, and we are proposing that for elimination. And there are some compliance dates for larger regulatory and warning signs. Again, there are not going to be any compliance. We are proposing not to have any compliance date for them as well. So what's going to happen is that the now agencies will have the flexibility due to this proposed lack of compliance date, that they can make the decisions on their replacement cycle based on the resources they have and their safety needs. Just very quickly, there are 3 specific compliance dates which were established as a part of 2009 edition and which we are proposing for elimination. The one is in Chapter 2D, the Section 2D 45. There is a requirement that to install the guide signs on multi-lane conventional road approaches to interchanges, and the purpose is to let the drivers know that which direction they need to turn to access the interstate, the freeway or expressway. There was a compliance established in 2009 edition, was December 31st, 2019. We are proposing to eliminate that compliance date. But again, just want to point out, the requirement is still there. The signs are still required, but we are proposing not to have any compliance date for that. We heard a lot of concerns that installing these type of signs, usually agencies install them on the overhead. There was concern that the overhead structures have a much longer service life, and existing overhead structures don't have space to install these signs. So just want to point out that you can have these signs post-mounted as well as overhead. The agencies do have that option. But again, the requirement is still there, but we are proposing not to have any compliance date. In the pavement marking part 3, specific to the section is 3B04 and 3B05. There's a requirement for dotted lane lines for the non-continuing lanes, such as drop lane, auxiliary lane, acceleration lane, deacceleration lane. There's a requirement to have those drop lane markings. And then there was a compliance date established in 2009 edition, and that compliance date was December 31st, 2016. And with this proposed rule, we are proposing to eliminate or delete that compliance date. We heard a lot of comments on that specific the compliance date. Some agencies use very durable payment marking, and also that due to resource constraint, agencies are extending their resurfacing cycle. So they wanted that relief. And so what we have decided to eliminate that compliance date altogether. The last I want to talk about is there's a requirement in Part 8 of the MUTCD, and the requirement is to do the traffic queuing study for the grade crossing when they are within the 200 feet of roundabouts. We established a compliance date of December 31st, 2014. We are retaining the requirement, but we are proposing to eliminate that compliance date of 2014. There are very few there are very few roundabouts that close to railroad crossings, but there are many more are in the planning stage. So we wanted to cover those at the planning stage, but so there is a requirement, but we are proposing to eliminate that compliance date. So that's all I have on the compliance date part. But again, there are a couple of things I want to point out. The one is that this is a proposed rule. This is not a final rule. So there is still opportunity for public comment. And as I mentioned, that the deadline for public comment is October 31st. So you have plenty of time to put your comment in. Towards the end, I will give you the link how to get to the how to put your comments in. But these are just our proposal. These are not final rules. And also, the second important part of that is that we are just addressing the compliance date. So all the requirements, they're still in place, and we are not changing those requirements. Only thing we are changing is compliance dates. So that's something that's very important, and I hope you can take away from this presentation. Now, very briefly, I want to talk to you about the second proposed rule we have out. That's on the definition of a standard and use of engineering judgment. Again, it's a very narrowly focused rule. It's specifically it's tried to address the two specific sections of the METCD. It's 1809 and 1813, and it's a very narrowly focused rule. Again, we published that at the beginning of August 2, 2011, and there's a 60-day comment period which ends, I think, it's end of this month. So you have only the 1 week to get your comments in. Again, this is just a proposal, and we are looking forward to getting your input on this rule as well. So what we are doing and why we're doing it. This issue started with when we published the 2009 edition of the METCD. As a part of that, the final rule, we added a sentence to the definition of a standard statement. And on your screen, on the top part of your screen, you see the statement we added. Basically, it states that standard statements shall not be modified and compromised based on engineering judgment or engineering study. And that's how we differentiate standards from guidance. That on guidance, you can modify them based on engineering study or engineering judgment, but standards are mandatory and you have to follow them. And just for the clarification purpose, what we did was in the section 1809, we deleted a few sentences. Over the time, it appeared to us that these sentences caused some confusion. So we were, just to clarify the language a little bit better, we deleted those specific sentences from the section 109, and they are listed on on the screen. And we added that specific sentence. The purpose, our purpose was just to clarify language better. It was not our intent to change the definition, or it was not our intent how METCD is applied. So why we are doing this NPA? Soon after the 2009 edition came out, a number of state DOTs were concerned. While they understood that we are trying to clarify the language, their position was that it changes the meaning of a standard, and it changes the meaning of how to apply engineering judgment and engineering study. As a result, we worked with the state DOTs and a number of other public agencies and groups, and we issued what we call the official interpretation. It's a Federal Highways interpretation of how the METCD language works. And as a part of this interpretation, we emphasize that the changes we have made, they're only for clarification, and we don't intend to change the meaning. And that if agencies want to go back and use the 2003 language in the state METCD or state supplement, that would be okay. But still, the number of states thought that the official interpretation does not cover the liability on the states and other public agencies. And they requested that Federal Highway change the METCD, go through the rulemaking process, and change the language of the METCD to clarify this position. So that's exactly what we are doing here. So what we are proposing, first of all, that added sentence in the standard definition I talked about, we are deleting that, removing that sentence. So the cross-out red, which you see on your screen, that we are proposing to take that sentence out. That's a number one change. The other change we are making is in section 1809. We are adding a new guidance statement, and the guidance statement, as shows on your screen, would say the decision to use a particular device at a particular location should be made on the basis of either engineering study or application of engineering judgment. And that goes to the concerns expressed by a number of public agencies. And then furthermore, just to provide the more clarification, we are adding an option statement. And the option statement would say that when an engineering study or application of engineering judgment determines that unusual site conditions at a particular location make compliance with the standard statement in this manual impossible or impractical, an agency may deviate from that standard statement at that location. Again, that gets back to this issue that the state DOT had, that sometimes there are site-specific conditions where you cannot apply standards. It's impractical or sometimes impossible. So we wanted to make sure that we cover that in this proposed language. So that's the extent of what we are proposing as a part of this rule. So how it's going to intend to apply? Again, as I mentioned that the standards are mandatory conditions. Our purpose is not here to allow agencies to deviate from a standard on a blanket basis. And also, we wanted to give them flexibility that there's situations where they cannot comply with the standard, that they, based on engineering study or judgment, they can deviate at those particular locations. So again, it's a very narrowly focused. This is, again, it's a proposed rule, and we are seeking public comment. And on this proposed rule, the docket will close within a week. Now, how do you get more information and how you can submit your comment on the docket? On our website, this METCD website, you have the top link. There is a wealth of information available on both of those rules. There are contact information, there's the proposal, the Federal Register notice, all that information is available on our website. But if you, I encourage you to take a look at it, and if you want to submit your comment, you go to this regulations website. It's www.regulations.gov, and you have to enter the docket number if you want to put in your comments. You can do a lot of search, but the easiest way to put the docket number, and here's the docket number for compliance date as well as for a standard definition rule. So I strongly encourage you to review this information on the METCD website, and please give us your feedback. We are really looking forward to get your feedback on both of these rules. It seems like there's a lot of confusion and a lot of questions, and hopefully my presentation today answer some of your confusion or answer some of your questions and clear some confusion. And you can always go to our website to get more information. And on the website also you can get the contact information if you need further information. But now that's all I have on the comments. And here's my contact information. And I'm looking forward to answering your questions. Brad?
All right, Hari. We are starting to receive some questions for you. And the first one comes in. It says, if the proposal is passed that eliminates the 2018 street names retroreflectivity minimums, will there be any requirements for a proactive monitoring of minimum retroreflectivity levels on street name signs? It says the industry is hearing a lot of buzz that street name signs will no longer have to be monitored for retroreflectivity at all.
Well, again, as I mentioned before, that the requirement to maintain the minimum retroreflectivity standard for street name signs, that's not going to change. So there's still going to be a requirement to maintain the minimum levels, but the compliance date will be gone. So what it does is it gives the agencies a little bit more flexibility to develop a method and establish the replacement cycle based on their safety need and based on their constraints, the schedule constraint, their resource constraint. So the requirement is still there, and so that's not have changed. The only thing has changed that the compliance date will be gone. So now the agencies have more flexibility to establish their replacement schedule.
Okay. Our next question, it said these rules have been established after many years of work by a number of committees and feedback through other rulemaking processes. Does the agency anticipate negative impacts on safety by postponing or eliminating the dates as it is proposing to do?
That's always a concern. And when we did the request for comment, and I encourage you to look at the document, our preamble or our Federal Register notice, where we go in detail talking about the safety issues related to these requirements and the compliance date. And that's the safety concern is one of the prime driver why we decided to keep the regulatory and warning signs as a part of the compliance date for the management method. So, but again, we wanted to give the agencies the flexibility. So the agencies have to establish their own schedule based on their safety needs. And the agencies who deal with maintenance, operations, and design issues on day-to-day basis, they are in the best position to identify their safety need and establish the maintenance schedule and replacement schedule. So that's what we are focused on, to give the agencies more flexibility because they are responsible for those facilities and they are in the best position to make those decisions.
Okay. Given the change in these dates, do you anticipate that having more time to come into compliance will change the cost of the technology needed to measure minimum levels of retroreflectivity, making that more affordable for local agencies?
Oh, absolutely. That's always the case. But also, there are a number of methods in the METCD. The direct measurement is one of them, but there are a number of methods you can use. If you look at the METCD, there are 6 or 7 methods listed. And then also, you can design your own method, how to establish the minimum, whether the signs have fall below minimum levels or not. So the agencies have a lot of flexibility how to establish or how to come about or deciding that whether the signs have fall below minimum levels or not. So they have that flexibility, and obviously with the development of more technology, there's going to be some cost drop as well.
Okay, good. Our next question. If the final rule is not issued by January 15th of 2012, can states use the 2003 text instead of the modified 2009 language text, 2009 text for this change?
I'm assuming that you're talking about the standard definition rule. And as
Yes.
I mentioned, that we issued the official interpretation on this topic, and that's exactly what we said. That since what we consider this change as for clarification purposes, agencies have that flexibility to use the 2003 language. So yes, the agencies do have that option to use the 2003, and if they intend to, they can revise it and use once it becomes the final rule, use this final rule language.
Okay, very good. Well, we'll give a few more minutes. We don't have any more questions at this point, but while we're waiting, a couple of announcements that I would like to make regarding future webinars for the Clearinghouse. And again, please feel free to send in questions. We still have some more time. We have 2 more webinars scheduled this fall that I'm sure you'll want to join us for. The next one is a tutorial on establishing effective work zone performance measures, and that will be held on October 27th with presenters Tracy Scriba from the Federal Highway Office of Operations and Jerry Ullman of the Texas Transportation Institute. And the purpose of this webinar is to introduce you to the reasons that work zone performance measures should be established and to describe the general process that agencies can follow to establish work zones performance measures that are useful to them, and to provide examples of how agencies can start computing work zone performance measures from the data that they may have available or can easily collect. So that would be a pretty interesting webinar coming up October 27th. Then on November 30th, we have our next webinar on managing speed in work zones. And that will be presented by Melissa Finley of the Texas Transportation Institute. And in that webinar, they'll be discussing the determination of work zone speeds is typically based on state laws, agency policies, and engineering judgment. Many factors impact the decision to reduce the regulatory speed limit in a work zone, to implement speed limit management strategies, and to utilize speed reduction strategies. The information presented in this webinar should aid agencies and highway contractors in understanding these factors and the interaction amongst those various factors. So again, 2 good webinars, October 27th, Establishing Work Zones Performance Measures, and November 30th on Guidance for Managing Speeds in Work Zones. So hopefully you'll join us for those. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions, Hari.
Well,
so.
yeah, just one more thing. I again want to reemphasize that these are proposed rules, and we really need your feedback. So please, I strongly encourage you to go to the METCD website, get more information on our website, and then go to the regulations.gov website and provide us your input. We are looking forward to getting your input, and I do appreciate spending time with you this afternoon talking about these rules.
Okay, very good. We still have time, and another question has come in, so here we go. This comes in. It says, I was just forwarded a local newspaper article stating that cities, counties, and states must replace all traffic signs and street signs with the new reflective signs by 2012. This has caused quite a stir. Can you please confirm that this information is correct? And it sounds like some old information.
Yes, and that's not true. Again, as I said before, if you look at the current compliance date of 2012, I think that's what you're referring to, that's only for implementing an assessment or management method. It's not for replacing signs. It's just establishing and implementing a method. And we are proposing, and as a part of this rule, to extend that 2012 compliance date by 2 years, and then also limit it to only regulatory and warning signs. So it's absolutely false that all signs needs to be replaced by 2012. This 2012 in the current METCD is the deadline to implement a method, not to replace non-compliant signs.
Okay, good. Another question has come in. It says, if there are no compliance dates, what will happen to those agencies and people who never comply?
Well, again, I mean, there's still a requirement in the METCD. So those requirements have not gone, and we are proposing to retain those requirements. All the thing we are changing is the compliance date. And the agencies will have to make that determination based on their safety needs and based on their resources, that what signs needs to be replaced and what. And since they have more flexibility now, they should be able to defend their decisions if there's a liability situations. So again, there's still a requirement, and the agencies now have flexibility to establish their own replacement cycle based on their safety need and their resources.
Okay. Here's one that's more related to work zone signs. It says in the 2009 MUTCD, says there are no URLs on signs. In your presentation, you indicated that existing signs could remain for their useful life. If they use a sign that they move from work zone to work zone, would that be allowable since the sign has remaining life, but it's kind of a new installation in a new location?
There was always a prohibition on the use of URLs on the traffic signs. And I think it's even more important in the work zones, because there's so much happening and things are changing in the work zone. That's even more important in the work zone, that the drivers need to focus on the driving task. So I think there always was a prohibition on the use of URL. So if you have a sign, it's a non-compliant sign to begin with.
Okay, very good. This is just more of a request here. Trying to find my, we've jumped down a few bit. Okay. What is, after the docket is closed, what is the time frame for the decision, and then how will agencies comply with the standards once the states adopt the 2009 MUTCD?
I think you're asking for what's our schedule for these two proposed rules,
I
and
assume
then
so.
come the final rule. The process is basically that the comment period will end for one rule end of this month, and for next rule end of October. Once the comment period closes, we look at all the comments and we analyze them, we review them, and based on our review and analysis, we come up with the final rule. A lot depends on how many comments we get. So that's one of the factor. And then once we establish the final rule, it has to go through the review process. So we don't have a firm schedule. And it's hard to establish a firm schedule because we don't know how many comments we're going to get.
Yeah.
But the one thing I can tell you that as soon as the day final rule is published, it's going to be on our METCD website. There's a way you can sign up to get the updates from the METCD website. You can do that. So as soon as we post that on our website, you will get an email telling you that we have posted that on our website. So that's the easiest way to keep track of this.
Yeah, I think that kind of falls in line with this next question that's asked about the likelihood of that happening before January 15th of 2012 that would allow the states then to adopt the changes with the new 2009 METCD.
At this point, it's very hard to predict the schedule because we don't know how many comments we're going to get. And it's interesting that most of these comments tend to come in the last week of the docket period. So it's hard to predict that how many comments we're going to get and hard to predict our schedule.
Very good. Next question, it says, I understand that agencies that don't meet the compliance state subject themselves to its liability, but who will enforce the agencies to comply with these new dates?
The enforcement mechanism has not changed from how it works right now. So on all the federal aid projects, they have to comply with all the federal regulations and standards, and that Federal Highway Administration has that responsibility. But on non-federal aid highways, I mean, one of the biggest thing, the way it gets enforced is through the tort liability, the concern of the tort liability. So agencies comply with the METCD to alleviate or because of their concerns with the tort liability. So how the METCD get enforced, that has not changed. It's going to remain the way that it works now.
Okay, very good. Another request here. It says, can the clarification in today's presentation of not deviating from a standard jurisdiction-wide or as a blanket be added to the final rule? I guess this is a comment you made earlier.
Absolutely. We'll add that to our final rule, and it's already in our Federal Register notice for the proposed rule. But again, if you have any concerns and comments and these type of suggestions, they are excellent suggestions, and I certainly hope that you will put it on the docket as an official record.
Very good. Several of you have asked questions about where they can get copies of these slides. These will be posted on the WorkZone Clearinghouse website. That's www.workzonesafety.org. We'll continue to have a link on the homepage that will take you to the recording of this presentation as well as the slides. All right. Well, thank you very much, Hari, for participating. I think that's all of our questions for now. There may be some that come in, and if they do, can we forward those on to you for a written response?
Absolutely. If you get more questions, feel free to send it to us, and we will respond to those questions, definitely. And again, I want to thank you to let me be part of your afternoon. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Hari. And thank you very much for joining us.